Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. As we enter February, I'm just reminded of the expectations that it may bring. In the States, we have Valentine's Day and all all it refers to our that special someone in our lives. But also, February is a time that World Cancer Day is kind of reminded, and their theme this year is Close the Care Gap, as they recognize the power of working together. Revive Ministries wants to expand that idea of connecting to our support. Today we have a new guest, Dr. Reshie, and I'm just so glad you were patient with me. And as we kind of progress forward, technology does happen, but we're just I'm just happy to continue the conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for, first of all, being so generous in saying that it was your and not mine. But to return the compliment, thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
No problem. I want to share with those listening around the world. Disclaimer: if you are in crisis, please seek help. Sometimes that might be the hardest thing for us to do, but whatever resources are at your disposal, I do encourage you to find what it is there. In the States, it's 988. That's one avenue, but resources and what helps us in supporting us is different for everyone. Like I said, Dr. Reshie, people say better than I do. Sean Stevenson says it this way: communication is merely an exchange of information, but connection is an exchange of our
Mm.
humanity. Can you share a little bit of what your thoughts of this quote is?
Yeah, well, I think I started off with a quote from uh, the great Emil Durkheim, who noticed the industrialization of uh, this is the end of the 19th century, and people were moving away from the farmlands and into the cities.
Mhm.
And when they were in the fields, whole families would work together and whole communities worked together and supported each other. But in the cities, people could be living right next to each other. And then the
Mhm.
cities got even bigger. And it's almost like living in a shoebox in the sky, a concrete
Mhm.
shoebox in the sky. And you don't know who's up there, you don't know who's down there, or who's
Yeah.
there, who's there. So you see them in the lift. Do you
Mhm.
communicate? Yes, but is there a connection? Well, that's a strange kind of connection if you say there was. So I would have to agree with Mr. Stevenson on that one. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, and
absolutely.
I think it's I think we have so many ways to connect to each other, but we don't.
Mm.
Like, even though before, even to call someone over the phone to another country was like very expensive. It was very, but now, it's at our tips of our phone, but we don't really communicate. And the one thing I noticed before COVID, I see families all around the table at dinner. They haven't seen each other for ages, and
Mm.
they're all phones. They're not connecting. They're they're there, but they're not there. So I find this level of connectedness. The tools are there, but we, like you said, and like Stevenson said, that there's information exchange maybe, but connection takes presence. Like, I'm here with you.
Yeah,
I'm not, and
yeah.
it's a skill that I feel is kind of, unfortunately, I don't see often enough.
I
Um,
think it's part of why I choose to live. Sorry to if I
no, go
cut
ahead.
you off there. I think it's partly why I choose to live in Bali, where I could be making a great deal more money if I lived in, say, Bangkok or
Mm-hmm.
uh, Singapore or Australia, or England, where I spent most of my life. Um, and I think I was telling a quick story about an American gentleman who was riding a bike that was too powerful for him, and he lost
Mm-hmm.
control of it, and it just went. the ditch, and he was standing by the side of the road, scraped up. And once I'd made sure, ascertained that he was not in any way, he hadn't hit his head and needed an ambulance, I just blocked off the traffic using my bike, and I didn't have to do anything. 3 chaps just got off their bikes, and because he was asking me if I knew a number for a tow company or a AAA or that, the 4 of us just jumped into the paddy field, and I said, you can come and help us as well if you like. So he jumps in as well, and we just lifted the bike up onto the road, put it on the road, dusted off all the water and stuff like that, made sure the engine was dry, or as dry as possible, and it would dry once he got the thing going. Turned the ignition, the bike was on, and I still remember the look on his face. He said, in America, that would never happen. Nobody, if they saw you with your bike with your motorbike in a ditch, nobody would stop to help you. You're on your own. And there's the feeling of community. So I have a lady staying with me at the moment. I'm single. I'm divorced, more accurately. I have a lady staying with me, and I don't know her, but I do know that she's a very good pal of someone very dear to me. So, that's enough. And again, it's the same disbelief. What, you're not going to charge me for any of this? Can I pay for it? And it's just, no. This is how we do things. And that is taken directly from how the Balinese live, from their culture, from their way of life, and how they see the world and what's important to them. It's taken directly from them, which I find alarmingly beautiful. It's
Yeah, and back in the, I would say when I used to see someone and superficially be like, "How are you doing?" They're like, "I'm okay." That's usually a conversation or something like that. But now I've noticed a shift to how busy we are. Like, "Oh, how's everything?" "Oh, I'm busy." Everyone's super busy doing a lot of things. I'm like, and it's no longer how it's the measurement of my value is how busy I am. Like, I just remember just some of the harder times. And what I'll just say it this way, Dr. Reshie, I do my best work when I slow down. When I'm when I'm trying to do everything at once, when I'm so busy and so self-important, I tend to stumble a lot more, and I tend to lose sight of what I'm actually trying to do. And I feel a lot of times the conversation I have, especially working in the mental health field myself, is the level of urgency. No one slows down enough. Everyone's constantly afraid, and their I would say their value sometimes, not all the time, or their concern is always external. They never take that self-talk to talk to themselves. Why does this matter? They never ask the question, why am I, not to say the situations they're in may be difficult. I'm not minimizing, but at the same time, it's always outward. They never ask themselves, well, why is this bothering me? Why is this so important to me? And sometimes that self-talk, I feel, is because they don't feel they have the opportunity. I feel sometimes it can be a huge barrier of them moving forward. I want to ask you, switching gears, is when thinking about support today, and what played a positive impact in maintaining a healthy connection? with our support? Like, what advice have you seen, and what has not helped? I guess is what I'm asking in preface.
Well, what I think helps in maintaining a healthy connection, I mean, the first one is just good old time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You have to, because time, uh, it says a number of things to the other person. First of all, it says, I'm willing to sacrifice something to come and
Mm-hmm.
meet you. And the other thing
Yeah.
it says is that you're important.
Yeah.
So time. So that would be uh, a critical factor, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think, I always think quality over quantity.
Yeah.
I'm not one. You know, Sometimes I am, but I'm an introvert anyway. I'm not one for big gatherings, which they quite like here. This is a
Mm-hmm.
place where everyone's on the beach at night, and yeah. um but it's where I can, and as a mental health professional you'll know exactly what I mean, where I can take on board what somebody says, and I can reflect back to them in a way that they know I've heard them, and that
Mm-hmm.
I've picked out the
Mm-hmm.
bits that were really important to them, not the fluff or the,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but the thing that's really important, and that
Yeah.
really solidifies a connection in therapy as it does in
Mm-hmm.
any connection. um, and I'd point to those two things,
Yeah.
and the other obvious things, doing stuff together. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very much more connected to my Indonesian pals on the surf front, because I surf with them. I don't surf with what we call the bules, the foreigners. I mean, most of whom are from Australia and Europe. They don't look like me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very unusual in that I look Balinese, but I am not, and I don't sound it, even though I can speak the language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so it's going out and doing stuff. But I'd say it's the first two, you know,
Yeah.
time, and the ability to really listen.
Yeah.
I think that would be it for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do. Time is. If you give the presence, if you're not looking at your watch, it deflates the conversation. I could be talking to you or someone, especially in a crisis situation, or they're just having a bad day, and I'm like, just
Mm.
keep looking at my phone. It's like, well, are you here or you're not? Sometimes, especially those tense moments, it could, it feels very much like you're not heard. And then at the same time, like you mentioned, when the person's able to reflect on what you said at the core, not
Mm.
at the fluff, communication's a lot about listening, not so much about talking. So if you're able to kind
It
of
is.
really hear the person, you could draw a little bit closer. I do feel the struggle, especially me being in the States, is the level of urgency of busyness. Busy to be busy. A lot of times I ask my clients,
Mm.
what what hobby do you like? What do you do for fun? Right? And they a lot of times,
Mm.
especially during the crisis situation or whatever they're going through, is like, I'm allowed to? Like, I have to do all these tangible goals before I could. I'm like, well, and then you get other people who are like, well, I would want to do this hobby that's so unreachable. They have, there's something like right in front of them, like maybe a guitar that they never touch anymore, versus I want to do mountain biking, which they don't have a mountain bike. They haven't, like, so they're making more barriers. I always try to encourage those who I work with, try to find the things you like with the least amount of boundaries or barriers, so you can kind of be consistent. Start from there and go outward, because hobbies, as silly as it is, I feel can help, at least for me, when it comes to, as weird as it is, as it comes to communicating. If it's always about something else or someone else, and it's never about you, how can you really communicate? And how can you really connect if you're not really connecting with yourself? So I find that for me also has been helpful when building healthy connections. Because at the core, I may not understand the person's what they're going through, but I understand what sadness feels like. I don't have to. I will never say that I know what you're going through, but empathy is something that I feel is an ongoing process, a skill that you learn. But at the same time, it's also very useful to kind of really connect a little bit deeper. I'd like to give my new guest, Dr. Reshie, an opportunity to share a little bit about your story, unaltered, whatever you feel comfortable with, as we kind of continue to proceed. And go ahead. The floor is yours, Dr. Reshie.
Okay, well, I was born in the early 1970s to mixed race parents. I was born in Singapore and grew up. I spent my early years there, and then eventually went to school in England, boarding school. And then after that, I was a fairly bright boy. And this is something that I think is worth highlighting, because the assumption that was made at the time, and I think is still being made, is if you've got let's use the US system, okay? If you've got a kid with a 4.0 GPA, that kid by definition doesn't have any problems. That kid is just, right? By definition, that kid is doing absolutely just fine. Leave the kid alone. That you couldn't be, you just couldn't be more wrong. And looking back now, I now realize that the signs that things were starting to go very badly wrong for me were there. But people only saw the grades, and they were good, so they didn't bother with the rest. So medical school and becoming a doctor, and I've just written a book, and I can't go through the whole sequence of events. Don't have enough time for that. But there was one particular incident that caused the whole facade, if you like, caused my whole, the bits of plaster and sticky tape that held me together just all fell apart, all in one go. And it started off a very rapid descent into a life of alcoholism and drug addiction. I'm very, very open about this now. Eventually, when I came to the end of what I hope was my addiction for the last time, I was homeless on the streets of London, hopelessly addicted to heroin and crack cocaine. So it was a spectacular descent.
Yeah.
And on the 8th of May, 2011, that's the last time I drank, and the last time I injected anything or smoked. anything illegal or
Mm.
anything like that. And here I am today. So that's really the backdrop. And
Mm.
when I came back uh, to to get re-licensed as a doctor is not an easy thing, particularly where substances are concerned, because you're the guy with the prescription pads,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
You know, you could have a lot of fun with that, and I did.
Mm. Mm.
um, so you have to go through 5 years of very rigorous, uh, continuous urine testing, hair samples, all the all the works, and psychometric, continuous psychometric evaluations, all sorts of regulations for 5 continuous years, at the end of which you would be examined by two fellowship level psychiatrists who would both have to concur that you were fit to practice. And then the fitness to practice directorate would allow you to practice under very heavy supervision for
Mm.
6 months. And if you did okay, then they would lighten the handcuffs a little for
Mhm.
another 6 months. But essentially, for 2 years, you would be under some kind of supervision before
Mhm.
you went back to being a physician again.
Mm.
And I remember that day arrived that I worked for, and it's like, yes, going back to my career. This is what I'm here on the planet for. Um, but by that point, things had changed. I'd
Mm.
found the world of psychology. I'd found the world of neuroscience. Most important of all, I found the world of trauma,
Mhm.
and which just fascinated me endlessly,
Mhm.
um, both on a personal as well as a professional level.
Mm.
And it was a classic fork in the road, and I had to make a choice. And I remember thinking to myself, rather grandly, if you know,
Mm.
if if it could be said put that way, I can either go off and be a reasonably decent physician, good
Mm.
doctor,
Mm.
caring doctor, can either go off and do that, or I could go off and have the potential to become an exceptional, traumatologist,
Mm.
psychologist. Not that I will, but that the potential was there for that to happen.
Mhm.
So that's why I say, rather, you know, maybe a bit of grandiosity
Mm.
there. But
Mm.
at the time, I thought that to myself, and I thought, well, that's not a choice.
Mhm.
So much to the surprise and consternation of family, friends, and just about everybody, I said, no, I'm not going back to medicine. I'm
Mhm.
going back to school and retrained as a psychologist, and also did a master's in neuroscience and psychology, and did all the training for the trauma work that I do, the EMDR and all that. You know, it just got narrower and narrower till I got to where I wanted to go,
Mhm.
and uh, spent years working for the institutions in this part of the world that have the best outfits for that. So like
Mm.
uh, the trauma team at the cabin in Chiang Mai. The cabin is Asia's largest rehab, probably most luxurious as well. They had a standalone trauma program, and I was to call this luck is to give luck a bad name. I mean, it's really to understate it, because when I was there, two of the finest traumatologists happened to be taking a sabbatical, and both were at this center. And so I had not one, but two masters to learn from.
Mm.
And and they were very generous with their knowledge and their skill. And when it became apparent to them that I was very keen and I wanted to learn this, I think their attitude to me was, well, if you really want to learn this, I'll teach you. I'll show you how to do this. You're gonna have to really work your socks off, but if you really want to do it, so the deep generosity of these men, and some very good fortune, and eventually I was promoted, and I was back in Singapore, and I was running their outfit in Singapore, and that just got better and better and better. And by this point, it happens in any clinical specialty, you start to get known. People who've been to see you and gotten well, somebody needs a therapist, they go and see this guy, and the word kind of goes around, right? For something like that, a personal recommendation carries far more weight than any slick marketing or any slick because it's such a personal thing. And so I developed enough of my own reputation to be able to go off my own. And so I did. And once I did and set things up in such a way that I could work various telemedicine platforms, now we have Zoom, we have all kinds of things. But back then, this was 2017, nobody was doing that. But if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be able to live in Bali. So moved over there, started with that, and then wasn't intending to take on any local expat clients, but then took on two of them. And it just so happened to be that these two were the most connected and the most loudmouthed individuals in the whole community. So it just so happened, and before I knew it, I had people banging down my door, and suddenly we were up and running, and that's where I am now.
There's obviously no one. Most people know, like, the knowledge is there, but a lot of times we all know that there's a great need when it comes to, you don't have to go far. You just go down the street. A lot of times I think it's kind of especially the marketing, slick marketing. I know, especially in the States, being a veteran myself, I know it's kind of, look at my dad, he was in Vietnam. Me, I served during 9/11, and I'm just thinking, there's a lot of fanfare when it comes to veterans, but you just go down the street and you see a couple veterans with no resources, nothing. And a lot of times, I'm not saying there are gaps. Let's just be honest. So the need is there. Is what I'm saying. There is definitely a need, and I feel culturally it's catching up in weird ways. You know, my mom's South Korean, my dad's Puerto Rican, so I kind of am a mixed bag. So I understand different cultures of how they see this kind of stuff
Yeah.
and whether they even recognize it or not. The point is, it's still there. You know, you always have that one uncle, one cousin that no one talks about. But
Yeah.
I feel now we're trying to find ways to communicate with them. It's one of the things that we're always playing catch up, but I feel communication, even if you're not in the field, even you're just working at wherever, your communication is a skill, which I always like to say is something that's learned. It's nothing you're inherently just by happenstance. And I didn't learn how to communicate just because I was around people. I could be around a lot of people and not communicate well at all. Proximity doesn't
Mm.
do it. It's how we go about it. My track coach back in high school, he would back when he used to say, "Practice makes permanent. Doesn't make it perfect. So if you do it wrong, it will kind of make you do it the wrong." So it's really being aware, self-aware of how you're communicating and how you connect. I know for one, the love languages they have. The whole for me, acts of service. So I appreciate when someone comes, but other people like to be, how you say, they like positive affirmation. I don't because I feel I'm kind of I kind of go in my shell because I don't. Especially it goes by the level of how much I know the person. I'm like, why are you appreciating me so much? I barely know you. But if you come and help me, like, no, I'm working on my car and you try to help me shine a light, I appreciate that so much more. It's just different,
Yeah.
different things. Um,
Mm.
George Bernard Shaw says it this way: the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion it has taken place. I think. What do you think about this quote?
Mm. Well, I mean, obviously, I can't know this, but I suspect that he may have borrowed,
Mm-hmm.
a bit of it from Karl Marx's introduction to his critique of Hegel's philosophy of right. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the the passage roughly goes, it's the famous one, where he says, that religion is the opium of the masses, but it's completely taken out of context. So if I read the whole thing, he starts
Mm-hmm.
off by saying, uh, religion is, the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart in a heartless world, the soul for a spiritless condition, an opium for the masses. Right? To demand that we give up these illusions is the demand to give up the conditions that require these illusions in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
We, our aim should not be to seek to wrench from these wrench from men and women their illusions so that they be forced to bear the chain without illusions, but to break the chain
Mm-hmm.
and no longer have the need for illusion, and he was talking about something different, but there's enough in that says to me, Shaw would have read that and thought, that's that's good. I'll use a bit of that. No, I mean, if it was relevant in Shaw's day, it is. I mean, 10 times more so today, because
Yeah.
as far as I see, I don't own a television.
Mm, mm,
Um, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and I went to a boarding school where there were no televisions.
mm,
And, if you were a small brown kid like I was, you spent a lot of time hiding out in the library. So
mm,
my television is a book that takes me into a fantasy world.
mm.
Um, yeah, and I think uh,
Yeah, I just
when you have
yeah. Go ahead.
sorry
Sorry.
when you have illusion in place of communication, um, I think what he's really saying is, um, you have something that you think you have, but you don't,
Yeah.
versus something that's real, you know, in the same
Yeah.
way that Mark said. Yeah.
I think that's the worry of the complacent attitude of connecting. Like, well, like you, you we may have conversations with those we love or people we care about, but it's very we don't want to dive deeper. I think Thomas Lloyd he says every answer can be followed by another question. It's like we're not as curious anymore. It's like, well, he's okay. We like to generalize because it's easier. Everyone's this way because it's easier to fit in a box. But as you know, it's not that easy. I think the best way to communicate is creatively. How we are creative and how we tell our stories. One of the best modes of communication is through a story. And the basics part of that story is the character. Why do we care about this? You can have the setting, it's all nice, but what we really care about is a good character because we could relate to them. And that's how it's communicated. Music's the same way. A good song, we can listen to it and it has a deeper connection. We understand this. We like movies, we like good stories, but when we think about communication, it's just like you said, like in the turn of when we're going to the globalization, we're just like, okay, I just need to know what the weather is, where is the tack, where is the tow truck. But really, we don't really thrive for anything more than that. And it can lead to, well, at least for me, when we're talking about connecting, when we talk about connecting with our support, it can be difficult. It can be almost daunting. Like in the beginning, I
Mm,
remember saying, very simply, I always have a disclaimer: find what in your crisis, find help. I think finding help can be the hardest thing if you're not able to connect with your support or even know what support you have out there. I know that for one is part of that closing the gap, as World Cancer Day is in February, but anything we deal with, I think the people we may have very complex issues, but the reasons why we do it are simple. It's funny, you have this um, complicated issue of, well, my brother or my cousin, he's just going through so much, but the reason I do it because I love him. I want him to do well. I don't know how that'll look. I have a lot of ideas, but it's just that kind of thing. So I don't know. I want to ask you, kind of. I know this has been really
if I
great.
can,
Go
if I
ahead.
can just add one little anecdote to the last question. I mean, I had the good fortune to uh, have dinner with a very nice lady yesterday. We met for the first time, and we sat at the dining table. You know, this is Bali, so absolutely everything is outstanding food wise.
Mm,
And we spent the best part of 3 hours trying to get one up on each other over Nietzsche, or uh, who else did we do? Um, yeah, Nietzsche, Kant, And then we moved into the 20th century, where we talked about Arendt, and then that led us to Heidegger. Was he a Nazi or was he a Nazi sympathizer? And it's like, who the hell cares? I mean,
Yeah.
Nazi sympathizer, bad. It's it's now we spoke fluidly and candidly, and it was a beautifully fluid conversation for 3 hours. But is that communication, or is it the illusion of one? I say it's the illusion of one, because I'm there to show you how clever I am. And I'm here, and once I've picked up on that, I'm here to say, no, that's, you got it the wrong way around. So if you looked at us from the outside, you would have gone, that date is just going absolutely brilliantly, because these guys can't stop talking. They just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and talking about which year Nietzsche got syphilis, and it's, I mean, this stuff.
Yeah.
Did he end his life in this sanatorium or that? It was just, it was the illusion of communication. It's so, and the reason why I wanted to add that, tack that onto the end, is that it can be very dangerous, because it can make you think that I'm really communicating. I mean, we're talking about philosophy here. We're talking, some real stuff, but we're not. We're not really communicating, because the critical ingredient that's missing, as you would almost certainly know, is authenticity. There's nothing authentic about it, right? And authenticity, were it to be pursued honestly, would eventually lead to a point of vulnerability. And then it's, well, once you're at that point, what do? Are you going to cross the Rubicon or not? Was there discussion? Yes. Was it enjoyable? Fantastic. Did we end the night well? We ended the night extremely well. Yeah, it was really, really fun, but there was no communication, because there was nothing authentic about, and I was as guilty as she was.
It's easier. It's easier to talk about things, like you said. You have those talks with your friends, those late nighters or whatever, but you're really talking about everything else besides what's right in front of you, each other, like anything really deeper, and it can be scary. I think Dale Carnegie kind of says it this way. It says, it isn't what you have or who you are or where you are or what you are doing that makes you happy or unhappy. It's what you think about. I think sometimes we don't put enough weight on how we see things. A lot of times you guys, situation where the fact is this didn't happen. I'm with a client, but that person feels it did happen. So where are we now? So like, well, do we dismiss the person who we factually see that didn't happen? No, because the fact that person feels is as real as the person who thinks it has a fact. So this creates a conundrum, because you're like, well, am I communicating or no? You're not, because the real thing is this person, even though you have the information that it's fact, it still is impacting them just like it is fact. So that is where I feel loosening and kind of, I don't know, thinking that you're seeing the person as a person, not as this person like you're competing with. Understand that, hey, maybe this person, I know he's been going through a lot or something. Getting some context. We have a lot of the pieces already, especially if it's someone we know, but we usually just throw them away. They're already in the back of our mind. We're not even using those contexts. We're just like, well, this person's wrong. I need to tell them that they're wrong. And a lot of times, it will blow up in your face because you don't know what they had happen that day. They may have a really bad time and they really feel this way. You're now creating a barrier between you and that person because it's more important to be right. The rightness of yourself is more important. It's almost like your value is how right you are. And I feel communication is less about that. It's more about connecting. And I feel
Mm,
we've been kind of saying that
so true.
the
So
whole
true.
time.
Mm,
I want to ask you as we
yeah.
kind of wrap things up, what have you seen personally that helped build a better self awareness for yourself and those you work with? I don't know. I know self awareness is kind of coined a lot, but what have you seen helped build a better self awareness?
Well, this is going to be a bit of a strange answer, but I think that what's helped me build a better self-awareness are actually the people I work with, my
Mm.
clients.
Mm-hmm.
They are my greatest teachers.
Mm.
They are, I weep with them. If you're doing real therapy as opposed to staying within the confines of counseling, then you are allowing yourself to take on some of what your client's feeling is feeling, because unless you have some approximation of how they're feeling, you cannot know what it feels like to be them, right?
Mm.
um, and you know going through their journeys and seeing how they pull the shattered parts of their life together and how they do it, and how uh, the human mind is just this incredible machine. And just when you think this person is just worked with them for 2 years, we've barely moved an inch.
Mm-hmm.
I, maybe I need to think about suggesting a referral or something, and then bang, something will happen,
Mm-hmm.
and everything's changed. So personally, self-awareness, it would be my clients. I
Yeah.
always think of what happens in the therapy rooms, and I always think, don't be so sure of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because the capacity of people to surprise you, you will know, is unreal.
Yeah.
What has not been um, or what has been a barrier to developing self-awareness? Um, insularity. Insularity in the sense that um, you know uh, I only want to go to certain types of functions. I only want to be around
Mm-hmm.
certain types of people. I only want to
Mm.
communicate with very exclusionary. Some would say uh, very snobbish,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they might have a point. Um, yeah, but that it being very insular and just thinking, I've got my world, I've got all the pieces, they work great for me. Now everybody else, get the hell out. That's an extremely insular way, and it And when I'm deep in that, I do not see anything, past the nose in front of my face. Absolutely.
Yeah. I just want to share this one scenario, and then I'm gonna ask your final thoughts. Um, I
Mhm.
had, I'm a leader in my church, so one thing I noticed is someone could come up and say, we're speaking World Cancer Day. Someone could say, "My mom beat cancer." You see this, and then you hear a lot of amens and all that. But what you
Mm.
don't notice, I remember this one illustration was the person who gets out of there crying and going to the foyer, going to the front of church. She felt extremely not heard because she just lost her family member last week. You see, there is this like someone's good news and someone's bad news, and people don't realize this when you're when you're when you're working with people. Um, it's complicated, it's messy, and I remember always reminding myself, especially when I'm working with people, someone's good news can be reflective of something they lost. We just went through the holidays. It can be one of the hardest times for people because it's a reminder of the extra placemat that no longer is needed, the extra chair that no one's sitting in. All this can be reflective. So my point to those who are listening is what you say does matter. Who you connect, how you connect matters. And it also will help not only, you mentioned it was, I learned the most from my clients, to tell you the truth. I totally, I'm very much on the same line with you. It's, it's, it's something very honest when you're connecting at that level. And I learned more from them than I would learn anything I learned in a book or anything else, because it really it's people meeting people where they're at. I just want to ask you as we wrap up, and it's been wonderful talk. Is final thoughts you want to share with those listening? I know that you could also share any like if you have anything you want to share that they could look like. I remember you saying you wrote a book. We'll put the links in the notes so that they could check it out. But any
Mm.
final thoughts you want to share with those listening right now as we wrap up?
Well, I don't want to be, too hucksterish and plug the book
Mm-hmm.
and all that because you'll put the link in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think following the theme of your podcast, what you obviously feel is important and to go along that. Um, my thoughts coming away from it would be uh, a healthy re-examination of the connections in my life,
Mm-hmm.
because it's very easy to take them for granted,
Mm-hmm.
which I've done on more occasions than I can count, and in some cases to catastrophic effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think uh, if I have one thought from this uh, lovely chat with you, it would be, connectedness as an expression of human attachment is probably the single most important survival mechanism we have. Don't take it for granted. Pay attention to it. Make time for it. Um, Meditate on it. Pray on it. You know, yeah.
I just
Yeah,
want to say
that
that
was my last. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts. ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. You can find all links to all the other platforms like YouTube, and we have on Instagram, and also just the podcast itself. You can see all the episodes there. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast. Leaving you with this last quote. It's Lao Tzu. It says, "A man with outward courage dares to die. A man with inner courage dares to live."